Get on with it, John Key said to the Reserve Bank earlier in the week. The Reserve Bank, in a speech about which there was increasing speculation, didn't get on with it. It said it was looking at things, but announced no immediate action. It also signalled a belief that much of what's happening was beyond its control, including buyer demand, driven, as you've just heard, being discussed by immigration. I caught up with John Key during a media stand-up in the West Auckland suburb of Massey this afternoon. He rejects immigration as a significant contributor to demand-led price increases, and he continues to insist there's more the Reserve Bank can do.
Well, I knew they weren't going to make an announcement on Thursday, but I stand by the statement I made, which is that they should get on with it. I mean, the reality is that the investor category has been a significant part of what's going on. If they increase the loan to value for investors, then they reduce the amount of reduction they can get through depreciation effectively. So in a way, they deal with some of those gearing issues. They've got all of that capability available to them. Actually, the major banks keep telling me that they want the Reserve Bank to do that. So the point is, yes, if they sit around, they can wait, but all they're doing is giving a signal to investors they're likely to do it, and all that does is encourage more investors coming in. And that point has been backed up again by a number of the bank economists and things today. So my basic point is, look, in the end, the bank has to make its own calls, but I personally think if they're going to move on investors, well, you don't need to wait 6 months to do that.
What should they do, Prime Minister, if they're going to get on with it? What is it?
Well, I think in terms of loan-to-value ratios, it's a 30% ratio at the moment. For investors, I think they can increase that. No, they can do that literally overnight. They have that capability. It's in place. It's working, and actually been working reasonably effectively. So, moving that ratio up is something that's within their power.
And is this kind of discussion now an acknowledgement that the supply side alone is not enough? I mean, are you seriously concerned, one, about the unaffordability of property, and two, about the exposure to a property bubble that people who are in the market have?
So I think in terms of whether the demand side things will work, I mean, firstly, we've been saying for some time that prices have been rising, more rapidly than the government would want. I think if you look at the demand side parts of the equation, they're not terribly effective at slowing up house prices, despite what people think. So I remember when everybody said put on the equivalent of a bright line test, it would solve the issues. Well, it really didn't. If you go and have a look in Australia, they have more extensive things like stamp duty, more extensive capital gains tax, and potentially soon a land tax. Those things haven't stopped Sydney and Melbourne prices going up. What will ultimately solve the issue is supply. That is dramatically increasing, and that's why there are 24,000 more people employed in Auckland. That's why you've got a huge increase in the number of houses being consented and built. But as we saw in Christchurch, it just takes some time, and it won't matter what politician gets up and tells you they can resolve that issue overnight. They're fundamentally misleading you, because there's just a lead time between how long it takes to get the infrastructure built and the house out of the ground. Now, we've had 20% compound growth in housing here in Auckland, a number of people working in that sector for the last 4 years. Just drive around Auckland, you'll see how much is happening, but it can't happen overnight, and it won't matter what politician tells you they can.
Prime Minister, the stuff you were talking about before, the growth in jobs, the apprentices, the growth in the housing market, that's substantively being driven by immigration, isn't it? And so therefore, it's not in your interests to address immigration, or even really to acknowledge it as an issue, because that's driving the economy, isn't it?
No, I think if you look at what's driving the economy, you've got three things. You've got very low interest rates. So, if you go back, they're the lowest interest rates in over 60 years. Low interest rates themselves don't drive economic growth. They help, but yet they have to be coupled with high levels of business confidence. So, for instance, Japan has negative interest rates, so does Switzerland. But actually, levels of economic growth in Japan have been fairly dire for the last 30 years. What's interesting in New Zealand is you've got very high levels of confidence from both consumers and businesses. So businesses think they'll make money, and consumers think they'll, at least people think that they'll get jobs. So if you think about those two aspects, that's what's driving it. Migration is one factor, but it's really interesting if you look at the data, for instance, around the number of residents that are coming to New Zealand. Those numbers have either been lower or actually static. So what's really changing is those New Zealanders that used to leave. And I remember then the debate used to be, if you want to see your grandkids, go to the departure lounge of the airport, because that's the place to see them. We don't have that discussion anymore now, because Kiwis are coming home. But that delivers another issue, which is, making sure there are enough houses for them.
The Reserve Bank did raise immigration as an issue yesterday, and we all know how cautious they are. We are looking at a net gain of about 5,000 to 6,000 a month. Are you comfortable with all of this?
Well, firstly, if you look at the speech the Reserve Bank gave, it'd be easy to overstate that part of it. There's about 3 paragraphs in it, and they themselves say migration could have at the margins some small impact. So they're not exactly arguing that that would dramatically change. Let's just go back to the point I made earlier. I mean, if you think through the logics of migration. Okay, so let's all agree we're not going to stop a Kiwi who's a citizen of this country coming back. Let's all agree that we're not going to stop Australians, because if we do have to stop Australians, then we've got to stop Kiwis going to Australia. We're not doing that. We're certainly not going to stop refugees that come to New Zealand. We're not going to stop people that come under the Pacific quota coming to New Zealand. So then you start getting down to 3 categories. One is students, and some of those numbers have been at the margins actually coming down a little bit, but that's an over $2 billion industry that employs lots of people. Then you've got working holiday programs, and if we stop students or young people coming on those, we've got to stop New Zealanders going on the reciprocal working holiday programs. I don't think we want to do that. So where you're really left is the piece around skills. And the question then is, do we have those skills? So we've got a 5.2% unemployment rate. We've got skills shortages already turning up in certain areas. And if you take the point I was making yesterday, I mean, take someone like Extreme Boats in Whakatane, where Stephen Joyce was yesterday. My understanding is they've got a very full order book. They employ lots of people. They're in Whakatane. They're a great company and a great employer. Would we really stop them bringing in 2 or 3 welders to make sure that they can keep everybody else employed? I think that would be really pretty silly. So migration definitely goes in cycles, and you can overstate and panic about these things. It's reasonably high at the moment, but I listen to all the economists, including the Treasury and even the Reserve Bank, who tell us it'll be lower in time.